Hi everyone. My name is Ivette Rodriguez, and I am the president and founder of AEM, a marketing communications firm that specializes in the U.S. Latino consumer and film and television. I'm also the co-founder of La Collab, which is an initiative co-founded by the Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti and me too co-founder Beatriz Acevedo, and we were founded in January of this year, which seems like a very long time ago, but our aim is to accelerate access for Latinos in entertainment and to double representation behind and in front of the camera. And the reason that we co-founded La Collab and that I specifically got involved was I grew very, I don't want to say desperate, but concerned, super concerned that our community was being erased. Data after data point was being released. And although we are growing in numbers and we are the economy, we are the growth of this economy, and we are the ones that keep America running. And yet we are being erased from media, from entertainment. And that is just unacceptable. When a man drives 650 miles to kill Mexicans and stop the Hispanic invasion, and when we have brown babies in cages and women, moms can sleep at night, it tells me that we're not human, right? Like, people do not see us as human. El Paso anniversary just went by August 3rd, and no one spoke about it. Okay, a mass terrorism against our community, and the media didn't talk about it. And so therefore, I think that this is a very, very critical moment in our countries. We have an election coming up. And so this is what keeps me up at night, and it is about helping and accelerating access for our community. I come from a working class family. And so I know what it's like I am the promise of the American dream, and it no longer exists. And that's what I'm fighting for, so that all people of color and marginalized communities can have the full promise of the American dream. And so I'm super excited to have this conversation with both of you. And I want you to share your whys, like tell me about your personal story, why this matters to you, and then we can get into the nitty gritty.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shango Eyee, or just simply the letter X. I'm a Bay Area native. I'm from a very Latino suburb outside of San Francisco called Richmond. I am one of 8 children, grew up extremely poor, dropped out of high school, taught myself how to code, spent a couple years in the military doing intelligence before working for different entities like the Canadian government, the government of Japan, and then finally landing at Microsoft. And now I'm at Google. At Google, I am the global outreach lead for responsible innovation, which is a team at Google that focuses on making sure that the way that Google uses artificial intelligence, or just AI, is in a way that's helpful to society. So my team does things like review Google's artificial intelligence to make sure it's not racist, it's not sexist, it's not biased in any way that can harm our most vulnerable populations. I really truly believe that technology is the magic of our generation, but just like magic, it can be good or bad depending on how we use it. Right now, we're kind of at an interesting point in time because as Latino people and as Black people, the world is sort of in a juxtaposition with where we are in a position to either go backwards or propel ourselves forward. And technology is playing a critical role in doing both. So there's technologies like facial recognition that are being used by police departments to identify suspects automatically that are very, very bad in terms of the way that they work for Black and brown people. So they're misidentifying Black and brown people all over the world, causing false arrests. At the same time, technologies like artificial intelligence are being used all over Latin America to do things like improve healthcare. So in places where there aren't radiologists, you can use artificial intelligence to like read x-rays and give results much faster. And I think that this conversation is extremely important because as we're at this critical point in time where we can really push ourselves forward as people who have spent hundreds and thousands of years oppressed in different ways, that we really need to understand the power that this technology has to be able to use it to improve our future and design the future that we all want for ourselves.
That's awesome. Thank you both for those amazing introductions. It's hard to come back after that, but X, I've always had so much love and appreciation for you and your journey and the work that you are doing, not just inside of tech, but outside of tech too. And it's just an honor to meet you, Yvette, and see the work that you're doing to continue to push our communities forward, because that's what this work is truly about. My name is Cordero Davis, and I'm originally from Mississippi. I grew up in a divided town where whites live on one side of the track and blacks live on the other. Our schools did not become desegregated until 2017. So this history should tell you about the experience that I grew up around and why inclusion and diversity is not just a part of my purpose, but a part of my ministry. It is important for us as individuals, as humans, to understand where there are gaps, there's also opportunity. But where there's opportunity, there needs to be access. And so my job now has been to be the bridge between tech, Asia, America, Silicon Valley, just to bring all of those communities together to infuse not just Black, Latinx, Brown people into the infrastructure of these organizations. I've spent time in Shanghai, China, Hong Kong, and Singapore, working in educational system, as well as supporting and consulting startups there. I've had the opportunity to build a bridge between mega organizations in Silicon Valley like Airbnb, Facebook, Indeed.com, and now Visa, where I lead diversity and inclusion strategy for our technology sector, technology being the most important sector of every organization in the world right now. And then we talk about media being one of the most forefront, shall I say, frontline workers of this pandemic, to tell stories, not just tell stories, but to tell Black and Brown stories, so that we can continue to be inspired and to be elevated and to be motivated to do what needs to be done, which right now it is thriving, moving from surviving, moving from just getting around, but moving to thriving, because all of us should be thriving throughout this experience. I'm honored to be here. I'm also excited to now be in having the opportunity to push my own personal business forward, which is inclusion and diversity consulting for businesses to help them build an infrastructure to retain and develop Brown and Black talent in organizations around the world. Thank you for having me here. Excited to be here amongst this panel.
Thank you. It is so exciting to meet you both, and your stories are incredible. I'm going to try to talk specifically, because this is LTX Fest and we're talking about our community here in the US. So we're talking about a purchasing power that's reached 1.8 trillion in 2020 and continues to grow. Yet we are largely absent in all halls of power, right? And we're absent in every single room. And so I think this is the time. We're here at Hispanic Heritage Month. This is a time for Hispanic Heritage Month to be every single day. And we, as Lin-Manuel said, we need to be in the room. I would like to know from your perspectives what you think technology, what can we do? Why are we still here? We know the power, we know the numbers. Why are we talking about this? How is this still possible?
Ultimately, I feel that we're still having these conversations because not that they are the majority, but they are the majority in power. When you have a majority in power, that cultural shift takes intention. It takes a soul, shall I say, reevaluation. It takes holistic reincarnation of what life should look like moving forward. And until we're able to reach the majority of those in power to have these mindful moments, to think deeper about the trenches that they have set up for us, to think deeply about the systemic barriers that we have all had to face, that we've all had to break down for decades on top of decades. We're just going to continue to be in that same seat of influence and having conversations and building business cases. This is no longer a business case. This is a human race issue. And we need to continue to formulate our, shall I say, our coalition. We have to do this as a unit. We can no longer do individual work. If you have issues within your corporation, you don't need to just go to the employee relations team and the legal team and tell your business. You need to tell more than that. You need to tell a group of people. You guys need to, like I said, come together, unified, no matter your race, no matter your background, and tell these stories, but not just tell these stories, but hold leaders accountable. And hold leaders accountable on top of being able to build your network. Your network is so important. Having people that have been in your shoes before be able to advocate for you, be able to be your sponsor. Doesn't matter the race or background. All of these components will create the cultural shift and transformation that we're looking for. So the top three things is definitely digging deeper into holistic transformation, because it has to be inside out, not just outside in. And then two, focusing deeply on building community, being unified in our messaging, and how we seek to transform and create change. And then three, making sure that we're investing in our network. Our sponsors and our mentors are valuable, so valuable to the continuous growth of not just ourselves, but the mission to dismantle systemic racism, bias, discrimination within the workplace and within all other forms of life for Black and Brown people.
Wow, that's really powerful, Cordero. I definitely want to echo what you just said around making sure the transformation is multiplicitous, and the fact that it's one, inside out, and two, that it's also holistic. Something else that I think I really want to add is that a good point that Ivette brought up is we have, I believe it's $1.8 trillion worth of purchasing power. And one of the biggest issues there is that that money doesn't stay within our community. It goes all over the place. It goes into businesses that don't hire us. It goes into businesses that would not put us in leadership positions. And one of the biggest things we have to be intentional about moving forward is that we have to spend on businesses that support us, that will support our people, so that we can funnel that money back into our communities. Now, sometimes that's hard. Maybe there isn't a Latinx owned, flower shop. Have to buy it online and wait 3 weeks instead of getting it 2 days later from Amazon. But that patience will allow those businesses to build up and be able to do things like offer you faster delivery, or be able to do things like hire more people and put them into more powerful positions. And I think one of those things that I'd like to echo is the idea that what we've built a lot of is programs. We have a lot of programs to change what's happening. What we don't have is institutions. And institutions are these things that are continuously, they own the means of production. They own the institutions are the banks. They're the hospitals. They're these systems that have been standing up for hundreds of years that keep churning out the same result, even if we're able to move things slightly in one direction or another. And so instead of just, and this is not to knock anyone who's building a program or who works on a program, but when you start building your program, look at how can I make this into an institution? How can I make this into something that will sustain itself even long after I'm gone? How can this be something that people can pick up and keep moving forward after I've left, or if I leave, or if I say, hey, I'm done with this business venture, now I'm going to go jump on another one, right? Another thing that I think is really, really critical and crucial as to why we're still here is one, 25% of all computer science graduates are Latino. It's not that we're not here, it's that they're not hiring us, right? And so I think some of the work that's happening is there needs to be a push. When I say that technology is magic, right? I really mean that we can build our own versions of many of these softwares out there that we're so used to having for our convenience today. We have not only the technological capabilities, but we also have the vision. When you think about apps like, let's take Vine, for example. What made Vine a really popular app? It was all of the content that the users were creating and putting on the app. Vine itself didn't produce any content. They didn't go out and make TV shows or funny clips. It was the stuff that people that look like myself, look like Cordero, look like Ivette, we put all of our content there. We put our culture on there, and that made that company a billion-dollar company. And same thing with companies like Instagram or TikTok or Twitter. All of our content is the reason that these platforms are able to make the billions and billions of dollars that they do, but we don't get anything from it. And what that reminds me of is an old term called sharecropping, right? So back right after slavery ended in the United States, they built this really tricky system that was slavery with another name called sharecropping, where they would allow people to come and work on the farms. And they said, hey, you're not a slave technically, but if you want to work on this farm and have a job, then you owe me money for the tools that I'm giving you to work on the farm. You got to pay me for them. And I'm going to charge you to use my service of working for me. And then I'm going to make all of the money and give you none of it. And that's kind of what digital media and like some social media platforms are like, right? So we go on there, we do all the work, we spend all this time making all the content, where we go on, we film ourselves for hours, you make all your content for the YouTube and the TikTok and all these channels, and you put it on there, and maybe you become an influencer. Maybe you get $100,000. But those platforms, by charging you for those tools, by selling your data, they literally make billions of dollars off of you. And so personally, I believe that social media is a form of digital sharecropping. And I believe that what we can do is we can truly come together and we can build new technologies that allow us to engage our communities and allow us to solve problems in our communities in a way that allows us to also build our own billion-dollar companies. There are technologies out there like 3D printing, right? Which is where you can print something that's like a real object out of a printer. So 3D print houses. Think about all the places around the world where there are Black and Latinx folks without housing because we can't afford it. You can 3D print a house for under $10,000. When we talk about the food shortages and living in food deserts, primarily, especially in the United States, you can build something called a vertical farm, which is where you take like a ship container, you stack them on top of each other, and then you just use a bunch of water and they grow food continuously all year. Solve our own problems with technology, but we have to be able to come together, to step up to the plate, to step out of these other systems that pull so much of our attention but give us so little back, and start thinking about how we can be more visionary with what we want versus reactionary to the way the system is set up and what we don't want from it.
That was extremely powerful. Thank you both. Wow. I want to echo in terms of the entertainment industry, 25 to 30% of the box office, right? And yet we're not in their stories, right? So it's very similar. But my question is, how can we use technology and content, which is what changes hearts and minds, right? To make a difference, because how do we get that message out? Because right now the system is set up to divide us, right? We're all divided, talking about our own identities or our own this, and this is exactly what they want us to do, to be divided. It's so important right now, not only for our Latinx community, but also all communities of color. In a little over 2 decades, we, people of color, will be the majority of this country. So I think it's super important, and the work that I'm doing is about coalition building with all of my brothers and sisters from the African American community and the Asian Pacific American community, and et cetera, because we are not the minority, we're the majority. But I ask you, because we get so frustrated when people don't show up to the story, to the Latin stories. Like we have a film, it's a Latino film, and nobody shows up. Well, because they don't have the P&A, the advertising pushing it the same way they would another film. But how do we communicate with all of us and come to a consensus and understand that this is happening, and then use technology, if you have any ideas?
Wow, I've had this conversation I believe for almost a decade now, since getting into the tech space. It really starts like early, investing in early, like our young people, like our youth is our future, and I say that with so much like bite, because I get chills even thinking about it. Like, you think about that, our youth is our future, like they are going to be the generational curse breakers. They're going to be the transformative leaders of these, so-called tech companies that are going to be only Latinx owned and only Black owned. They're going to be the people who are going to, take over the White House. They're going to be the people who are the decision makers, the police officers, all of that. And once we invest in them more, we have more opportunity to save our culture, to save our race, Until this summer, the world heard that Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter started more than 5 years ago. And to be honest, Black Lives Matter started over 400 years ago, And so for us to be in a seat where we're still fighting for the same thing 400 years later, somewhere the messaging isn't retaining well. It isn't being taken serious. It isn't being, thought of as an actual problem. The world has accepted us being second, us being last, as a normal thing, as an okay thing. as a regular American thing specifically, you know, because we talk about being Black and we talk about being Latinx, and we're all different around the world. You know, Black Americans and Latin Americans have faced the most, shall I say, turmoil that the world has ever seen from a racial standpoint, especially in modern day history. It is a continuous battle for us to have to go to work, pay our bills, and fight for equity and justice every day. I am praying, I am hoping that we are able to invest in our youth so that they can have the influence, the skills. They can easily go into an engineering track and learn how to code. They can learn AI. They can learn all these things very early so that they're not taking on the trauma of us. They're not taking on the wealth gaps that we've had to take on from our parents, from our grandparents. You know, we have to invest deeper in our youth. We have to continue sharing our stories, telling our messages that are going to transform and hopefully someday bring us all together to be the epicenter, which we already are, the epicenter of culture, the epicenter of hope, the epicenter of tech and media, because we already are. People turn on the TV for us. They want to see us, you know? I don't turn on TV to see people that don't look like me. Honestly, we just want more of it. And honestly, I don't go to work and fight for equity and justice for people that don't look like us. I work in a tech company that, you know, that doesn't have a lot of representation of people who look like you and I. So my job is to make sure that access is available, that opportunities are created, and that there is consistent conversation in how we embed inclusion and culture into the DNA of organizations, and not just to be some type of program, not it just be some type of checkbox event or some type of recruiting engagement project. You know, this is not what this is. This is, like I said, a human race issue, and we have to be holistic with our approach, whether that's in media or tech, because like I said, our youth are watching. And that's going to help us move things to the next level and continue to do the work. We're actually move from just doing the work to action.
Yeah, well, the thing that I talked, and I really appreciate what he just shared, but what I was saying, and I get that it's a future. I absolutely 100% know that Gen Z, I'm the mom of two Gen Zers, and trust me, I know we're in good hands. And I know that, and we need to give them all voices, and we need to listen to them because they are the future. I couldn't agree with that more. I'm talking about right here, right now, like that is the future. But I'm just wondering, like right now, how do we have this conversation? How do we use technology and create some type of content to help bring us more together? Because I do feel that the system is set up to divide us, right? And I know that we're starting to see a movement, right? And there's a lot of coalition building. We're seeing on social media a lot of groups supporting one another. This is, but also in our community, in the Latinx community specifically, there's division, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so, how do we, right now, where's technology to help that, or not? Like, is there? I just was wondering, you guys, if you had any ideas.
Yeah. So I'd like to talk about that. One, I think this is a problem that's twofold. One, right? Like we can make a TV show about this all we want, but I think it has to start at home. I am Afro-Latinx, and I can tell you that we have a very big problem in our community around colorism, around dealing with Black Latinos, or who are darker skinned or who are brown skinned, versus Latinos that look like Lopez, right? And I know that growing up in my community, in my family, in my household, there were always jokes, right? I got called a monkey by my cousins, all these different things, right? And I feel like we have to be real about the fact that this is a problem within our community. Recently on Twitter, there was a woman who went viral. She's Black and Mexican and very dark skinned, and she was singing a mariachi song, and she sang it so beautifully. And on her Instagram, there were hundreds of comments of people saying things like, oh, Black people are always trying to take our stuff, or, oh, they always want to, you know, why are they trying to steal this? Or she should stick to the jungle music and things like that. And so I think first and foremost, it has to start at home, and it has to start inside of you. You have the tools to remove your anti-Blackness from yourself and from your family. And you can identify as both if you feel that you are Afro-Latina or Afro-Latino. You do not have to deny or pick a side. If you are both, then be both. If you feel like both, then be both. But don't put yourself in a position as a member of this community to then make people feel like they have to choose sides or they have to have loyalty to one or the other, because that is part of the problem as well. When we say that the system is set up to make us fail, it's also set up to make us be in a position to where we end up fighting against each other, where we end up as Black and brown people facing the same struggles, but looking at each other like the enemy. So I think that that's one of the biggest steps, is we have to remove that anti-Blackness from our own community. Secondly, I think technology, in addition to like making content about this, which I'll get to in just a second, I want to bring attention to you guys to an artificial intelligence app that I've been working on at Google. It's a project that we've done where we're using artificial intelligence to analyze representation in media. So you can do things like feed it 2 million YouTube ads. And then right now, the artificial intelligence can tell things like how much women are on screen versus men, right? How much they're talking versus each other in these movies. And we did a study a few years ago of major motion pictures, and that it showed that the highest grossing movies were movies where women were on screen just as much as men. And even sometimes the movies that where women were the lead character and speaking more, those movies made more money than the other movies. And movie producers didn't know that. So by us giving them that data, 67% of movie producers shifted their future productions to match that information. Right now, we're building out the capability in the tool to recognize things like skin tone. So hopefully in the near future, we'll be able to use this same technology, artificial intelligence that's behind facial recognition, right? To be able to do things like provide data about how visible we are to these media companies, to give them insight, as opposed to anecdotal examples of I don't feel represented. We can tell them literally, this is how underrepresented we are, and use that to sort of push them to shift, in addition to generating our own content. Now, one thing I also want to say is that when we generate our own content, we have to remember to make it culturally accessible, right? A lot of times when people do tech videos, they use big words and they use like, hey, I'm going to teach you the computer algorithm is a series of steps that like they use this language and this diction that doesn't feel accessible to people who aren't already having professional lives or who aren't already in and out of these spaces consistently or who don't have the knowledge. So when you make your own content to share your story, to share your knowledge, don't feel like it has to be some particular format, like your boss at your corporation is going to watch it. Make it so that your cousin, make it so that your tia, your tío, who knows nothing about this stuff, is able to access it and understand it. And recently I've dropped a course that explains artificial intelligence in that way. You guys check out my social media. You can find it there. It's completely 100% free, but essentially I made artificial intelligence super easy to understand and completely culturally accessible. Yes, I still have my grill on in those videos.
That's wonderful. I'm going to check that out, because I'm one of those people that I'm completely like, AI, what is that? And it sort of like freaks out. So I will be checking in. So we've talked about a lot of things, and I'm so glad that this is being recorded because I lost my train of thought. We were talking about what we can do today, right, to use technology to accelerate to form, for us to unify, right? For us to unite more. And I guess the last thing I guess that maybe we should talk about is how can we hold these companies, these technology companies and entertainment companies accountable? Because that data that you speak of, I'm very interested in it, but there's a lot of data right now, and they're not, and the numbers don't lie, right? You see the numbers and it doesn't, and they don't lie. So what else can we do? Because I feel like it's not enough.
Yeah, definitely. I love how X moved into, some of the work that I've been extremely intentional around, which is product inclusion, making sure that more of companies, specifically tech companies, products are accessible for everyone. And that means not just creating, a product and not actually testing it in specific communities like Black and Latinx, creating focus groups, being able to create external culture councils. Some companies that are doing this already, which is great, is TikTok and Netflix. They've created creative circles so that Black voices and Latinx voices are amplified, and they're able to not only shift culture just externally, but shift culture internally at companies too. And investing in these communities specifically is the direction that we go in to holding companies accountable. Because guess what? Those representatives on those committees or those councils are going to be utilizing the data from their experiences, from their user experiences to say, hey, this is something that doesn't fit well for veterans or for LGBTQ plus people or for people with disabilities. This is some of our feedback, and we wish that you would invest more into making these changes so that your products are more accessible. And this truly creates a culture of including everyone, specifically Black and Brown voices. And so I love how you segued into that X2, so that we can dive deeper into how do we actually hold them accountable. True with data, but also with including our communities in the decision making of their products and how they use technology. And then 3, having more of us representative internally at these organizations. Representation is key, making sure that producers and directors are Latinx and Black, and then we talk about this intersectionality and not being able to choose. Hey, I'm a Black man with a Hispanic first name. A lot of people never assume that I am a Black man. They're Cordero, oh, he's Hispanic, and I've had some situations, like even with Uber drivers, they mistaken me saying, oh, I'm using someone else's account because my name is Cordero. So erasing bias and having representation and intentional training, not unconscious bias training, but intentional training around how to be more culturally competent and inclusive in your everyday life is something that we have to hold companies accountable for when they free employees like Uber drivers and Lyft drivers and Postmates and all these different things. They have to be just as in alignment and brought in up to speed just as an everyday corporate employee is. And so when we don't exclude that talent, when we invest in them just as much, we're investing in households. Like we talked about earlier, youth being our future, and also it starts at home. Those 2 things are key. Because when you're investing in someone and you're teaching them a specific cultural way to be in an educational environment, things change, the world shifts. When you are teaching someone and coaching them on cultural ways of being in a household, things shift, the world changes. So what we do at home, what we do in our educational systems matter so much into how we hold companies accountable, into how they actually invest in their employees, how they invest in their training, how they invest in representation. Because this is no longer, there are no Black people issue, there are no Latinx people issue. It's plenty of us. We out here and we're ready to work and we're accessible and you can reach us. You just have to want to do it. You have to have intention and you have to have the tenacity to know to ask us questions about what matters most to us and not figure it out on your own. Because if you're not from our communities, you don't always know what's best for us. So including us, amplifying our voices, representation, and then also making sure that we're investing in our youth, in their educational experience, and investing in our households. My first time working in Silicon Valley, my family was like, what is that? And I had to go back and teach. And so this is a trifecta experience. And if you're not present, if you're not truly mindful, and you're not practicing holistic work and healing regularly in your day-to-day life, then it is going to be a much longer journey. If you don't have the tools for that, feel free to reach out to me. I'm Coach C Davis on Instagram, and my website is corderodavis.com. I'm more than happy to share. And like I said, X, I truly am on board with you when it comes to how do we hold them accountable, how do we amplify voices, and I think the more direct way is through product inclusion.
Yeah.
Thank you.
+1 to product inclusion, I want to throw one more thing out there. In addition to product inclusion, I think it's really important that we call tech companies out publicly. Since we aren't so represented inside of these companies, a lot of the major changes that you've seen inside of tech companies have come from people getting together and putting them on blast, to be very frank. So for example, with facial recognition, how are the police getting the facial recognition technology? Companies like Amazon, Microsoft, and IBM were selling it to them. Google chose not to sell it to them because we felt like it was a violation of our ethical stance on artificial intelligence. So we never sold AI to police departments for facial recognition. But recently, in the last 6 months, because of all of the negative pushback from the community, not from employees inside of the company, Amazon stopped selling facial recognition to police. Microsoft stopped selling facial recognition to police. IBM stopped selling facial recognition to police. And this is after years of research had already shown that it didn't work well for our community. When we put our voice together and we amplified it and we said, we want you to stop, the companies listened. So I think that in addition to product inclusion, which happens internally, making sure that as the products are built, we have our communities present, which is the job of anyone who currently works at a tech company. It's also our responsibility to protect our communities by using our voices and our platforms that we have outside of those companies. If you have a Twitter account and you see something that goes wrong in a product, screenshot it, post it, make sure that other people know and are aware, and that way it can get back to these tech companies and put them in a position to be accountable. Now, I'm not encouraging you to, like go out of your way to blow up my Instagram or anything. Like, look at all this stuff I found at Google. But if you have or find anything like a Google search result or a YouTube video or anything like that that's harmful, use their reporting channels. I know at least at Google, when you say, hey, this search result is offensive, or hey, this image result is offensive, or hey, I think this video is offensive, we review that stuff and take it very seriously and do a lot of work to make sure that we can change those things moving forward. But it only, like, the people at the company, Google is only 100,000 people. And I know that sounds like a lot, but we don't represent the 7 billion people in the whole world. So when the world speaks up, we listen. And I think that's very important, that when you speak up about things that are going wrong in these products, that the companies will listen, but we have to speak up and not just be, oh man, that product sucks for me, and just telling our friends. Like, use your public platforms to say something, use the reporting channels within those tech companies to say something. Because sometimes they aren't even aware that it's a problem until you bring it to their attention.
And on that note, thank you both so much. I really enjoyed speaking to you, and I've learned so much, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.